Welcome into a special edition of the Shooting It Straight podcast with Justin Jackson. I am producer John. We are sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt, sponsored by Congruity HR, and we are here tonight to talk about North Carolina in the NCAA tournament. This is a surprise. I think I can speak for all of us here. We were watching the selection show last night, saw North Carolina's name pop up in the South bracket. It was a little bit surprising. There's been a ton of debate today in the national media about whether or not that is deserved, but all that matters is UNC plays tomorrow in Dayton against San Diego State. They are dancing, and we're going to talk all about that game tonight, get you ready for tomorrow's basketball. We appreciate everyone watching. We're live here every single Monday night on YouTube, so thanks for tuning in. Our regulars and maybe some new people tuning into the show tonight. Justin, I want to hear your reaction. I'm sure you were watching at home like I was last night. What were you thinking when you saw North Carolina's name pop up there in the bracket?
Um, I was on my way home with actually can't remember where I was coming from, but I had my kids with me and I was on the way home and right when we pulled into the driveway was whenever they pulled up the south region and I guess for some reason I was expecting their names like to be called last. I don't know why. It was like a whole dramatic thing. But they called their name and I pulled into the driveway and hopped out and yelled and my kids were looking at me like I was crazy and I was nervous. I'll tell you that much. I was definitely nervous. I didn't know which way it was going to go. Um, but super happy and super excited for them to, now go and try to, write their own little tournament run, right? Like the greatest thing about March Madness is that the records and everything like that, got you in or the accomplishments during the regular season don't matter, right? Like now you get to just go and play and not have to worry about, man, we lost that game or we did this. Now it's win or go home. So, I'm super excited. Obviously, them playing the quote unquote playing game. Um, but I think they've got, surprisingly, I think they've got a decent little route to make a little run. So we'll see what happens.
We're going to talk about that game, the first four game in Dayton tomorrow. We're going to look at the South bracket as a whole. We're not going to get too far ahead, but we will look a little bit at what the matchups could look like if UNC starts to advance in this tournament. I don't believe at all in the play-in piece of it. Not one bit for me. To me, you either make it or you don't make it. North Carolina is still in, the ball is still bouncing. That's really all that matters to me. I'll pull up this graphic here. North Carolina was one of the last four teams in. In fact, according to the NCAA, this came out in some of the quotes that they shared. They were the very last team in. A lot of controversy. Should West Virginia have gotten in? Should Indiana have gotten in? We're going to talk a little bit more about that later in the show. But Justin, as a player, you had the experience. There wasn't a lot of suspense when you were, sitting in that room trying to figure out where you were going to go. What's it like as a player to be watching that selection show, watch the kind of name pop up there, UNC in the bracket? And what do you think it was like for guys like RJ, for Jay Witt, for this UNC team to see that they still had some time left in their season?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I was lucky enough and blessed enough to not really have to be in this kind of situation. My freshman year, I guess it was a little bit more waiting, I guess I would say, as opposed to my last 2 years where we were number one seeds and it was just a matter of where we were going to play. Um, but I mean, I'm sure you get nervous, right? You start to think back to certain losses that, you start to think about as an individual player, things that, maybe you messed up on or, games where you just kind of let it slide and things like that. So, I'm sure they were nervous. I don't think any of these guys really truly knew or had any real confidence either way, right? So, you're kind of just sitting there waiting. So, thankfully, their name was called early on. And so all of that, stress and doubt was kind of wiped away quickly. But, it's one of those situations where no matter, if you're in a situation like this year's team or my last 2 years where you were a number one seed, it's still, an experience that not many people get to have, right? Of seeing your name called for March Madness, right? Like, everybody's watching. It's the best time of the year. It's what you work for the entire season. And so uh, to see this team get in, just super happy for those guys and that staff.
A few stats notes on UNC's appearance. This is it's North Carolina as an 11 seed, the lowest seed since the tournament began seeding the field in 1979. The previous low for North Carolina was the 8 seed. That happened 5 times, most recently in 2022. And this is the third time the Tar Heels are playing in Dayton in the NCAA tournament. Alabama beat UNC 79-64 in 1976, and then they played again in 2006 in Dayton. So this will be the Tar Heels' third opportunity to play there. This was a quick turnaround for UNC as well. They watched just like all of us last night. They hopped on a plane, and I'm sure got the travel bag together and everything like that very quickly. And they're actually practicing right now in Dayton. They had a media availability. There were some issues, I think, with their flight. It got in a little bit late, but they're in Dayton and they'll be playing tomorrow night. That game is late, 9 o'clock Eastern is the earliest it could tip, but I would guess it might tip a little bit later if the 16 seeded game runs a little bit long. Justin, we've got to talk about the national media reaction to North Carolina getting in the tournament. Every single year this happens. Every single year there's a debate about the bubble, who's in, who's out. But for some reason this year, North Carolina ending up on the right side of the bubble made a lot of people mad and upset. I have here on a sheet, Stats and Information has printed out a few quotes from national media. So, Justin, I'm going to read some of these takes from you, and I want your reaction as a former Tar Heel basketball player, just to kind of what goes through your mind as you're hearing some of these things. First of all, from John Rothstein, he says North Carolina being in the NCAA tournament over teams like Indiana and West Virginia is, quote, a miscarriage of justice. Shannon Sharp on UNC being in the NCAA tournament. Forget deserving. You get what you earn, not what you deserve. They didn't earn the right to be in this tournament. I watched Stephen A. Smith. He did a whole take, for a whole segment on First Take. I'm not really sure what he was talking about. He was going on and on about how bad UNC's defense was. I'm not sure exactly what he was talking about there. But Stephen A. Smith called UNC making the tournament disgraceful. And then you had today West Virginia Governor Patrick Morrisey saying he was going to take legal action. He was going to call real lawyers, apparently, and litigate this in the courts, take something against Bubba Cunningham. It's crazy. Some of your teammates, Kenny Williams, Theo Pinson, were on Twitter kind of a little bit shocked from the reaction from the national media about this. Justin, all of that, what are your thoughts around how people have reacted to UNC making the tournament?
Well, I think we first need to start off by saying that this happens every year, like you said, right? Like, there are teams that um, either get the short end of the stick, end up being outside the bubble, or teams that get in that maybe people don't agree with being able to get in, right? Like, this is, I think, one of the first times we've seen like a North Carolina be in this situation. Really, I know a couple years back when they didn't make it, they were like first team out, but they were on the outside, so nobody had anything to say about it, right? So I think we have to start with the fact that media, right? This is the hot topic. So guys like Shannon Sharp, guys like Stephen A, obviously, in their professions, this is what they're going to talk about. Now, I would love to ask all of these guys how many North Carolina games that they truly watched throughout the season, right? Or heck, even West Virginia game or an Indiana game. And if they look at me and they say, "Well, heck, I've seen at least 10 of them," then okay, then you have valid points when it comes to that, right? But if you never watched any of these games, then you can't necessarily have true validity to what you're saying, right? Like for instance, with Indiana, I watched Indiana play UTC, which is University of Chattanooga, right? And UTC was hanging with them the entire game. Indiana ended up pulling away. I think they ended up winning by 8. Um, but in that game, watching that game, I would say that Indiana is not a tournament team, right? Now, with that being said, you cannot, and I was talking to somebody about this today, you can't get around the fact that their quad one record was 1-12, right? You can't get around that. Now, with that being, already put out there, I mean, that's all anybody ever wants to talk about, right? Their quad one wins, 1-12. They couldn't even get more. I think I saw West Virginia's was like 6-10, right? I think there is something to. Now, I'm not somebody that's like a consolation, give out trophies type of guy, right? But there is something to having such a strong strength of schedule. And I'll say the majority of those games that you lost out of those 12 were all close games, and you very well could have won, right? Now, like I said, I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, but they almost got it, right? They still lost. But you can't sit here and say playing against these teams, Florida, who everybody is saying is probably, playing the best out of any team, and you very easily could have won, right? Duke in the ACC tournament without, some mistakes throughout the game. And then at the end of the game, they very easily could have won that game, right? Like, so there's certain games that you look at and you cannot sit here and say that North Carolina is not a tournament team, right? I think there's another side of things that nobody is really talking about. And that's the fact, like the business side of things. I asked my wife today, I said, who would you rather watch in an NCAA tournament? Mind you, she graduated from Florida, played basketball at Florida. I said, who would you rather watch, North Carolina or West Virginia in the NCAA tournament? Right. And I guarantee you, if you were to ask, not even North Carolina fans, but if you were to ask 100 people, I'd be willing to say 95 out of 100 are going to say we'd rather see North Carolina play in the NCAA tournament. Right. So there's the business side of things, right? Not saying that this is what really goes into it, but when the NCAA knows that North Carolina Tar Heel fans are going to travel and they're going to purchase tickets and obviously be able to do concessions and just provide more money for them, then more than likely that's also going to help in North Carolina's case too. So my thing is, you can argue left and right, right? There are games we've talked about it. There are games that North Carolina should not have given up throughout the season. There's just, you talk about the Stanford game. You talk about some of these other games that they just kind of, weren't able to pull out because they played two different halves, right? But then you look at the teams that they did play, right? You had an Alabama team come in. They got them pretty good. Florida should have beat Kansas. Duke, all of these games that they were close and had a chance to win, right? And then you look at a West Virginia team who they had a couple good wins, right? I think they had Michigan State. I think they maybe had Louisville early on in the season. Um, so, uh, it's one of those things where we're hearing it because we're on the last four in side of things, and we rarely are. But I'm sure other teams have dealt with this too, being a last team in. I'm sure they've dealt with a lot of hate. Now, I will say, with the way media is nowadays, of course, this is going to be a hot topic, right? Everybody's going to give their take, and everybody's going to, say, oh, they don't deserve, they shouldn't be there. Now, if North Carolina goes out here and they, win 3 games in a row, then I would love to see how these people talk then, right? I would love to see that. So I think there is an importance to North Carolina going out against San Diego State and playing well and pulling out a win. Um, but, people are going to talk at all times. They're always going to talk, especially people in the media, because that's their job to talk. And North Carolina is a huge brand and a huge program. So why not talk a little bit bad about them and get a few extra clicks? So all we can do is go out there and play the best that we can and, you know, win a game and move on, win a game and move on and keep on going.
I'm going to build on a couple things that you said there, Justin. You said if Stephen A. Smith, if Shannon Sharp have watched at least 10 games. I would be surprised if they were able to name UNC players, some players on this UNC team. I know for a fact they'd probably struggle to name players on San Diego State. This is not their area of expertise, but you had the college basketball experts, John Rothstein, ESPN analyst Seth Farnham. All of them were really piling on UNC. This graphic to me tells big part of the story. You look at the net rank and 8 teams listed there. UNC has the highest net rank of some of those teams on the bubble. I really liked your point as well, something you called out there about the kind of, it's a television show. It's a broadcast, and it happens maybe with the bubble. It certainly happens with the seeding. Every single year, it feels like somehow UNC's matched up against Kansas or Duke versus North Carolina in the Final Four. They're going to put these matchups together. North Carolina versus Michigan State, Roy Williams versus Thomas. So whatever it is, they're going to put these matchups together. So I think we'd be naive to say that didn't play a part at all. And just to close out this, there's not some sort of grand conspiracy here. If some things had broken the wrong way on Sunday with the bubble, North Carolina would not have been in, point blank. It took some things outside of North Carolina's control. Memphis beating UAB 84-72, preventing a bid stealer from the American Conference. That might have been the number one thing that allowed UNC to get into the tournament. And that, again, had nothing to do with UNC. It was just about the size of the bubble. The conversation starts to shift a little bit, though, because, all this noise has been going around, the national media. I don't know how tuned in UNC players are to this. So we got some questions about this. This is from Mr. Peterson 931 on the message boards. Justin, do you think the players are using all the negative media comments for motivation? Do you think Hubert will mention it? Could this kind of be a little bit of like an us against the world thing for North Carolina heading into the first four?
I hope it is. I think Coach Davis is an assistant. He always had a way of getting guys motivated. I'll never forget there was a game my junior year. We were playing against Tulane, and Coach Davis came in. It was before maybe the practice before we went to Tulane or went to New Orleans to play against Tulane, and he came in and was basically saying one of the guys on the other team was like the best defender in the country. Like he was, everybody talks about how good of a defender he is and whatever. And he kept on like saying that to me. And that had it definitely had a way of motivating, getting me fired up. And I went out and had a pretty good game. Right. So he does have a way of motivating people. Now, as a head coach, I don't know necessarily how much he talks about media and what they're saying and things like that. I think there probably is a fine line with that because you don't want the guys to really be paying attention to that. But at the same time, why not use it as fuel, right? Like some of the things that, the people are saying in the media, like disgraceful and uh, what was it about justice? Like basically,
A
um,
miscarriage of
a
justice.
miscarriage of justice, right? Like some of the things that are being said is just so like, guys, we're talking about basketball here, right? Like we're talking about something that we've dealt with for so long. Heck, look at the college football playoffs, right? With a team like SMU and who was the other team? Indiana that got in and then got whooped in the first game, right? Like those teams probably dealt with the same exact stuff, right? So it's like I think for this team, it's a matter of yes, use some of this for fuel. But secondly, it's almost like a fresh of breath air, or it's a breath of fresh air. Like, hey, I get to throw everything out, right? Like Jay Witt. Jay Witt gets to throw out the lane violation, right? And say, hey, guess what? We play on Tuesday at 9:10, right? Like that's all that matters. And I think that's what this team has to do. They have to go in, pay attention to the scout, the personnel, things like that. I know we'll talk about them in a second, but just focus on what they can do. And all they can do is go play this game, win this game, move on, win another game, right? And that's the beauty of March Madness. So for me, I could care less what all of these extra media people are talking about, what the West Virginia governor is talking about. Or if we're really talking about pressing charges over a NCAA tournament bid, like we've got some issues going on. So I hope this team is able to kind of block that out um, and just kind of focus on them and go in tomorrow and play their best game.
Last thing I'll say on the bubble, then we'll take a quick break. We'll talk a little bit about this matchup. Uh, West Virginia lost to Colorado in their conference tournament, 67-60. Perhaps the lawsuit could be placed within the West Virginia jurisdiction there or on the refs of that game or something. Again, that's something that was out of UNC's control. If West Virginia wins that game, they go on a little run in their conference tournament. Maybe things change, but that's not how it happened. North Carolina is in the bracket. They don't write the brackets in pencil. They're in Sharpie. North Carolina's in. There's nothing that anyone else can do about it at this point. Now it's just on the court. Best team wins from here on out. We're going to take a quick break here, talk about our two sponsors of this podcast and all of Inside Carolina's podcast. First, we want to shout out Johnny T-shirt. They are the best place to get Tar Heel gear, a Chapel Hill tradition since 1983, and 20-year partners with Inside Carolina. Visit them on Franklin Street or check out their big online store. Maybe you're going to go watch the game tomorrow night on Franklin Street. You can stop by Johnny T-shirt, maybe catching some basketball over the weekend. You can always stop by Johnny T-shirt. We appreciate them for supporting Inside Carolina. Second, we want to shout out Congruity, the leading provider for Tar Heel business owners' payroll, HR, and employee benefits needs. Inside Carolina listeners can get a free payroll and HR assessment by emailing Matt@Congruity. We've got a really healthy audience, lots of people watching tonight. Do us a favor, if you're watching here live on YouTube, put in the chat. Let us know where you're watching from. It's always fun to see where people are watching as we talk about the Tar Heels in the NCAA tournament. We'll be right back with more. We're live here on a Monday night talking about North Carolina. The Tar Heels play tomorrow against San Diego State. Appreciate everyone who is tuned in with our preview show. Let's talk a little bit about this matchup, Justin. It's a really interesting matchup. Before we got on air, we were talking about some of the similarities between these teams. As you started to do some study on San Diego State, what are some of the things that stood out about this team?
Yeah, I think it's just weirdly they're different styles, but also kind of similar matchups. San Diego State plays a little bit of a slower pace. Um, Obviously, we know North Carolina, they like to get up and down, score a lot of points. And at the same time, this San Diego State team, I think, matches up, pretty similar to what North Carolina is, besides their footer that they've got down low. They can kind of change the way that they play. I think you had mentioned that he's been hurt up until this point. So, I think, for North Carolina, taking advantage of that, not necessarily being in game shape is tough. So being able to take advantage of, I mean, for one, he's a 7-footer, so getting him down the floor already can be difficult. But not playing for a while, and now all of a sudden, first game back is NCAA tournament. That can be tough. So I think for North Carolina, it's a matter of focusing on themselves. Defensively, I think they've been on a totally different level than what they were early on in this season, just from the standpoint of the physicality, the pressuring, covering up for each other. They just seemed like a pretty cohesive unit defensively. And it's allowing them to be able to get rebounds, get steals, get out in transition, kind of get back to who they are. So I think that's going to be the biggest key is, can they force some turnovers? Can they force, one and outs and, get out in transition and let guys like Seth and Elliott and Jay Witt and, all those athletic wings get out on the break. I think it's a game that if North Carolina focuses on themselves and focuses on playing the way that they can and not necessarily, trying to change things up for San Diego State, I think it's a game that they can walk out of and move on into the rest of the tournament.
Tar Heel fans, there are three main names you need to know about San Diego State. Justin just talked about one of their one of them there, Magoon Gawath. He has been hurt since February 22nd. He got hurt against Utah State. He's been out. San Diego State hasn't been the same team without them, but he is supposed to be back. He's been practicing. I read some quotes from the coach there, and it looks like he'll be good to go. He is a difference maker on both sides of the floor. He was the Mountain West Freshman and Defensive Player of the Year, so that shows he can impact the game on both sides there, shot blocking. He can also shoot it a little bit. I think that's a really great point, though, Justin, about trying to work. He's working his way back from that injury. He probably doesn't have his lungs under him, so trying to put pressure on him, maybe get him into foul trouble. That's a recipe for success there for North Carolina. The other two players to keep an eye on, Nick Boyd. He was on the Florida Atlantic team that made the Final Four in 2023, so he's got a little bit of March Madness experience. He's one of their guards. And then Miles Bird, he's more of a wing. He averages 12 points, 4 rebounds, almost 3 assists per game. So this is definitely a very solid San Diego State team. It's going to be a tough matchup for North Carolina, but this is a matchup that I know the Tar Heels are really excited for. We did get a question, so I'm going to take another question here from the message boards. Appreciate everyone who contributed questions here. This question is from True Blue 61. Justin, I heard San Diego State is really good offensively, methodical on offense, and they lead the nation in some shot block stat. What do you think the Heels should do? I just hope it's not our small guards driving into the shot blockers. There's a stat there, or a reference to San Diego State's, front line, their defense. I think that defense certainly has improved with the conference defensive player of the year in there. So let's build on that a little bit. Justin, what do you think UNC should do? How should UNC attack this San Diego State team?
Yeah, well, obviously, San Diego State is in this playing game as well for a reason. You kind of look at what the way that they like to play. They like to play slower, methodical, which means less possessions usually, right? So for them, I think coming in, they were only giving up like 64 points per game. And so obviously that shows defensively, they're really good. They've got guys on the back line being able to protect the rim and things like that. But that number is also kind of skewed based on the way the game is going, right? So if they're able to slow the game down, then yes, there's going to be less possessions, there's going to be less scoring, which obviously I think for North Carolina, they want the opposite, right? Like they want to get up and down. They want to force these guys to play in transition. They want to force these bigs to get up and down. A lot of times whenever you have, you know, a team that has real rim protectors, you want to try to get them in space, whether that's in transition, whether that's getting them out on the perimeter more, whatever it looks like, getting bigs out into space and out onto the floor. They're a lot less comfortable. They don't really know necessarily what to do in certain situations, as opposed to just allowing them to sit at the rim. And it's going to be tough if it's a footer at the rim, right? It doesn't matter who's attacking. So, um, but I think this North Carolina team is very well equipped, right? Like they just played Duke, which was the biggest team in college basketball, right? So you play against a team like that, obviously 3 times at this point. You've pretty much seen probably, the most rim protection, the longest, most athletic guys that you'll see out of any other team, right? And so we saw obviously in the last game against Duke, they struggled in the first half. I think it was really less about offense and more about their defense. But then we saw how they made the run back, right? Like they got defensive stops, they got out in transition. Guys like Seth and Elliott, they just made their mind up to just attack the rim and get out in space, right? Um, but I think that's going to be the important part of this game is playing to that strength and not allowing San Diego State to slow them down as much. And so, I think playing against a team like Duke, I think Duke is a lot better than San Diego State, but playing against a team like them, I think has gotten them more than prepared to go against a San Diego State team like this, on both ends of the floor.
To me, you mentioned the transition. That's so key in a game like this. San Diego State is a very good defense. They limit your transition opportunities. So it will come down to players like Seth in transition, really attacking, trying to get those baskets. That's really key to UNC's offense. I think Seth is a big part of this puzzle on the defensive end of the floor as well for North Carolina. Like I previewed there, San Diego State has some pretty good guards. They've got another guard, BJ Davis. He's a little bit smaller. He's 6'2", but he's someone who can really score the basketball. So there'll be definitely a need for North Carolina to put their best defensive lineups out there to shut down San Diego State's guards, try to limit some of the drive and kick and try to limit some of the ball screens that they do. I think it's going to be a really exciting matchup, an NCAA tournament game. And we have someone here who's had a lot of experience with the NCAA tournament. We got a fun question from INGPM or Ling PM. Not exactly sure how to say your name on the message board, but thanks for the question. They ask, what is it like on game day at the NCAA tournament? If it's a night afternoon game, what is a typical day for players and coaches? Also, does the travel affect the players' travel and practice, then play the next day? So, Justin, can you take us through what that's like as a player?
Yeah, I think you had mentioned that they had a little delay on their flight, so they got in a little bit later. Um, but as far as the travel goes, thankfully, we're obviously blessed in North Carolina to fly charter. And so everything is pretty easy and pretty simple, right? Like you get on the plane, you go, get off, bus picks you up, either go to the gym if you've got practice, go to the hotel, check in, and then you go, to practice, and you've got all the media stuff when it comes to the tournament, right? So you got to deal with all that. But then game day, I was never a huge fan of the super late games, right? So like a 9-10 game, and I'm sure Coach Davis does it very similar, but a 9-10 game when I was in school, so we would have, I want to say it's 4 hours before we would have pregame meal. And usually right before pregame meal was shoot around. Um, and so I can't fully remember what it was when we were in the tournament. So that would basically put pregame meal at 5:10, right? And so the whole rest of the day before that is you've got shoot around somewhere in there, but other than that, you're just kind of laying around, sitting around, just waiting for the game to come. So for some guys, that helps them, right? You're able to relax, hopefully not think about the game too much. You just kind of, take it all in. For me, I was just ready to get it going. So these late games are a little bit tougher to kind of balance how much you think about the game, how much try to get away from it and just kind of be free. Um, but it's at the same time, NCAA tournament, there's no other experience, right? Like Maui's nothing like it. These neutral site games, there's nothing like it, right? Like there's just um it's a totally different experience. So hopefully these guys are taking it all in. Like that's one thing that I think our teams did really, really well was just being in the moment, right? And taking it, game by game and taking every experience, whether it's the open practices, the media, whatever it is, just enjoying it, right? And being able to go out there when the game comes and being able to play free and just have a good time.
I think the media piece of it is another big part of the tournaments. A lot of the tournament games have open locker rooms, so you're
Mhm.
interacting with the media a little bit more. So who knows? Maybe some of the stuff that's come in from the national media will be asked of the players in some of those open sessions today. And if they play again, if they continue to win, that'll continue to come up. So that will be something that's interesting to watch. Let's take a little bit of a look at the South region as a whole. Again, we're not getting ahead of ourselves here, but just looking at what the bracket looks like, where UNC would be. You guys in the chat can correct me if I'm wrong about this, but I believe if UNC wins, they would play on Friday against Ole Miss. So kind of an interesting twist there. Would get one extra day of rest. You can see there Auburn on the 1 line, Michigan State, Iowa State at the 3 spot there, kind of an interesting team. They've struggled a little bit with an injury, so that could potentially set up well for the Tar Heels. I'll also pull up some of the advanced metrics here. This comes from friend of the program, Evan Mia. He sent out this to everyone on his blog. South Regional Tournament probabilities. Keep in mind there that 36%, that is not factoring in a UNC win against San Diego State just yet. So if they advance past San Diego State, that number might go up in a matchup against Ole Miss pretty considerably there to advance to the round of 32. But Justin, just when you look at this South Regional, what are some teams, some matchups, some games that stand out to you?
I love this region for the Tar Heels for a few different reasons, right? Like first you got to get in, right? You got to beat San Diego State, but then you play against Ole Miss. I think his name's Sean Parham. I think he's a big ESPN commentator and broadcaster when it comes to college basketball. I saw a clip. He was doing his bracket, and he got to this part where he was saying North Carolina would play against Ole Miss, and he just completely disrespected UNC and was basically like, "Look, congrats for making the tournament, but that's about all you'll get, right?" But when I look at this Ole Miss team that they would possibly play, they've been very up and down as well, right? Like they've had some huge wins, obviously playing in an SEC where they had 14 teams get in. So they won some huge games, but they also haven't been just a dominant team, right? And so you look at this UNC team, who's honestly, if they hadn't played Duke, they'd be undefeated, right? Like in the last 10, 11 games. So for me, that game, it's March Madness. Like anything could happen in that game. Then you talk about Iowa State, right? Missing one of their, best players in Gilbert, that's out for the tournament. I think they're still a really, really good team, but heck, you lose a key player like that, that's going to be tough, right? So you look at that, a path like that, then all of a sudden you look at a possible matchup against a Michigan State team that you lost to in Maui. Like, why not? Right? Like, why not make it to the Sweet 16 and have that type of matchup against, Tom Izzo and a Michigan State team who's playing really well, but we want our lick back, right? Like we want to play them again and get them this time. So I love this region for North Carolina, and I say that as unbiased as I possibly can. You look at some of these other regions, the region that Florida is in, that region to me is absolutely loaded, right? Like there's some other regions that have a lot of teams in it that are difficult matchups. But you look at these games, I think they're very winnable games for North Carolina as long as they do what they're supposed to do and play the way that we've seen them play in the last, 10 games or so. So it just makes it more exciting for me, like knowing that, you know, everything before now is just completely out the window and this is literally a one game you either win or go home. Like that just adds so much more excitement to it, and as a player you might get a little nervous at first, but then you go out there and it's just every sort of emotion you just put all out there on the court. So I'm hoping this team does that, and I'm sure this staff is getting them ready for all that.
One more element of this tournament for North Carolina is going potentially from the first 4 and then having that momentum to play in the round of 64 against the team that they'll be matched up against, Ole Miss. So we were looking at some research. What is the history of these first 4 teams in the NCAA tournament? Last year, it was 2 10 seeds. It was Colorado and Colorado State. Colorado did beat Florida, but they fell to Marquette in the next round, so they did not make it to the Sweet 16. If you're looking for reasons to be optimistic, if you're a UNC fan, you've got 2 historical examples to pull from. Number 1, 2010-2011 season, VCU made it all the way to the Final Four as an 11 seed coming out of the first four. And then more recently, UCLA in the 2020-2021 season. If you're a college basketball fan, that team is probably one that you remember. Johnny Juzang was on that team. I think Tiger Williams, Tiger Campbell might have
Tiger
been his
Campbell,
name.
yep.
Tiger Campbell
Mhm.
was another really good player. They had Jaime Jaquez, who is a very good player right now for the Heat. They also went from the first four to the Final Four, and they lost to Gonzaga in overtime. So a little bit of an open-ended question here, Justin. Not saying to go from the first four to the Final Four, but maybe just to get to the Sweet 16. What does it look like? UNC goes to the Sweet 16 if. What are some things that need to happen offensively and defensively? Who are some players that need to play really well for UNC to keep advancing in this tournament?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a collective unit, right? Like there's not necessarily RJ has to be RJ Davis, a guy that we've seen put up crazy numbers, be an unbelievable North Carolina legend at this point. Um, then Allen Lubin has to play the same way he's been playing, right? Not necessarily does he have to be 20 and 10 every night, but he's got to be consistent and effective and physical and be that true big, that we've seen him over the last few games. The freshmen, unfortunately, have to mature a little bit. Not saying that they aren't mature, but the NCAA tournament is a different level, right? And so being able to pick up your game along with everybody else pretty fast, playing against a new team that you haven't seen. I think that's going to be huge. Drake has been unbelievable. And Ian, obviously, I think he's, trying to work through just kind of, whether it's struggle shooting or being involved or whatever, but they need his scoring, right? Like they need Ian to score. Elliott has, last game was really the only true reason besides Seth, from the guard perspective that, we were still in the game, right? And so we need him to be consistent, not turn the ball over. But I think for me, my X factor, and I know people probably, were off him for a while. Maybe they still are. But my X factor for this team will stay Jalen Withers, right? If Jalen Withers plays well, right, doesn't make certain mistakes and things like that, this team looks really good, right? And they play really, really well. If he doesn't play well, then it looks a little bit different, right? And so I say Jalen Withers is still my X factor. Obviously, everybody else has to play really well. Jay Wash has to play well off the bench. Whoever else might, come in and play. Everybody has to play well. But Jalen Withers, for me, is the guy that has to, be consistent and be effective on both ends of the floor. He just has a different look that nobody else on this team can give other teams, right? You talk about like a good four man, right? Like Jalen Withers can guard him. He can also go at him on the other end because he's probably more athletic, more mobile, can make more plays at the rim than their four man, right? So it's just a totally different look when he's on the floor and he's playing well, playing confident. Um, so give me Jay Witt, man. I put my confidence back in him. Obviously, we didn't talk about it, but the mistake at the end of the game, um, I think everybody would say, that can't necessarily happen at the end of the game like that. Um, but at the same time, Jay Witt has played extremely well for this team, and at times in games has been a big reason why they've won. So I'm gonna stick with him. I'm gonna still put my confidence in him. So let's see if he's got my back like I've got his back.
We did not talk about that moment yet tonight on this show, and the mistake there on the foul line, the violation. Inside Carolina put up a clip of that moment in the post-game press conference. I don't know if you saw this, Justin, but Hubert Davis put his arm around Jalen Withers, and I will give the North Carolina fan base some credit as well because I look at the Instagram comments and things like that. I'm on there a lot, and 99% of comments were very positive. Everyone kind of put their arm around Jay Witt as well because everyone kind of understood that was a mistake and, maybe not the reason not the only reason North Carolina won that game. Maybe this is a good place to end for tonight. March really is about stories. Every single year, there's a team, there's a player that comes out of nowhere and really takes over the tournament. And what an amazing story it would be. New life for UNC on the bubble, new life for Jalen Withers, an opportunity to continue his college career, to see him go out and dominate, to be that X factor for North Carolina and to help the Tar Heels advance. I think that would be a really awesome March Madness story. Justin, take us out here. Any final thoughts, last words, last bits of nuggets of pieces of knowledge about UNC San Diego State, the matchup? Anything else for us? Close us out here on a Monday night.
Yeah, I mean, it's March Madness, right? Like it's this time of the year with college basketball, and like I'll continue to say, right? Like when it comes down to the tournament, nothing else that has been done previously matters, right? The amount of one seeds that you see that, get upset, and the amount of, Cinderella teams, you always see at least one, right? Like, and if it was based on how the regular season was going, there's no way that that would happen, right? So for me with this team, it's a matter of, you know what, screw everything that the media is saying, right? Yeah, we'll use that as motivation, but y'all don't know what we have in this locker room, right? Y'all don't know the confidence that we have. Y'all don't know, how much we really want this, right? And so for us as a team, it's a matter of going out there, playing for each other, playing hard every single moment you step on the floor, right? And do what you're supposed to do, right? Play the way you're supposed to play confidently, shoot the ball confidently, move the ball, play together defensively, do what you've been doing and get out in transition, right? And if this team does that, then I think that we will see them come out with a win tomorrow and move on against Ole Miss. I guess on what, Thursday,
Friday.
Friday, and who knows what happens, right? But like you said, why not write our own story, right? Everybody else right now is trying to write a story of how we shouldn't be in the tournament and how it's disgraceful and it's a miscarriage of judgment, right? Like, why don't we go ahead and go write our own story, man? So I'm excited, man. I'm super excited, and it should be a good time.
Appreciate the almost 400 people for watching us. Make sure if you're watching us here live that you're subscribed to the Inside Carolina YouTube channel. Make sure to like this video as well. Inside Carolina will be back tomorrow night after the San Diego State game with a post-game podcast. You can check out Justin on To the Baja, the other podcast. I heard you guys might be doing a live watch party as well, potentially. We'll see what happens with that. That could be awfully fun. So check that out as well. Appreciate everyone watching, and we will talk to you all soon.